I coming across?
You're fine.
I find it sounds good.
You're the right volume too, which is often the thing about the home situations. It's hard to get the volume right.
So we're good.
And no pets in the background, so that's good.
Well, Simon Gibson has this cat that wanders across the screen with its tail up during our meetings. And I don't mind it, but you can see that some people are like, what the hell's that? So welcome to Facebook Live. Time to take the mask off because we're suitably distanced. I'm here this evening with Tanya Kaul, our candidate in Duncan Lake Cowichan, and with Alex Reid, our candidate in Vancouver Hastings. And we're going to have our customary evening chit-chat. And we always start these things off with a bit of get to know you. I'm Andrew Wilkinson, the leader of the BC Liberal Party. My riding's Vancouver-Colchena. And we've got two candidates in contested ridings who will introduce themselves. So, Tanya, why don't we start with you? Tell us where you live, a little bit about the riding, and what got you into politics.
Well, my political aspirations began as a BC young Liberal, entering the BC legislature for the very first time. I worked for the BC Liberal caucus in opposition under Gordon Campbell, and then later transitioned into government. So I've always had this burning desire to return to the legislature as MLA one day. And here I am. I'm one step closer to fulfilling my dream.
Great. And a little bit about your riding?
Yeah, so for sure. So I'm honored to represent the valley, the Cowichan Valley, which is a big riding in terms of geographical. It stretches from Herd Road in the north section all the way to Okotokus Drive in the south. So lots of the business center is in Duncan, and then we have lots of rural areas in Shawnigan Lake and the Cowichan Lake area. And it's a real thriving area in terms of young people moving into the area as well as businesses.
And of course, you're up against Green leader Sonia Furstenau. So are you seeing much of her in the riding just now?
No, I believe Sonia's been very busy as the leader and doing her role as leader of the Green Party. So I've been taking advantage of door knocking in every area of my riding and getting to know voters and really feeling the momentum growing with all of our great our announcements of what we can do for the province.
That's great. And Alex, you've taken on a particular challenge in Vancouver Hastings.
But a fun challenge.
So tell us a bit about you and about the riding.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. Pleasure being here. My name's Alex Reid, and I'm representing the great riding of Vancouver Hastings. So a little bit about Vancouver Hastings. It's a very diverse, cosmopolitan riding, a lot of young families moving to the area. We stretch from Commercial Drive over to Boundary, and then Grandview Highway up to Wall Street and the water there. So real diverse mix of, a great base of immigrant families, a great base of people that have moved from, say, the west side over to East Vancouver, and a real diverse, strong, community-orientated riding, I'm finding. It's a real great place to be.
And there was quite a controversy in the selection of your opponent. What was the upshot of that?
Well, yeah, we have obviously Shane Simpson was the long-term NDP MLA, stood down and has now been replaced by Nikki Sharma. And Nikki's definitely got a bit of a colourful background with the whole, let's just say, LNG issues.
Yes.
And maybe a little bit of a divergence of opinion from her party. So we'll see how that plays out over the next few weeks.
Come on, Alex, we're in politics. We're trying to defeat them. So what's the sore spot between Nikki Sharma and the NDP? Well,
let's just say John Horgan and the NDP government's been out obviously promoting LNG, big proponents of LNG as we are, and Nikki Sharma's very much against it, very anti-LNG, which is interesting. She's been supported by many cabinet ministers, like David Eby over in Point Grey, for example. So I find it a little interesting that there's a strong candidate in that riding who seems to be on a different page to John Horgan and the NDP.
Right. Now, we've talked to Tanya a little bit about what made her get into politics from her experience working in the legislature. What drew you into this line of work?
Well, I feel very blessed. I moved to Vancouver 20 years ago. I'm from the UK originally. I moved here, I didn't know a single person in town. I didn't have a job to come to. Literally had $2 in my pocket to rub together and had a 2-week reservation in a hotel and had to build my life. And over the course of that 20 years, BC has really provided me some amazing opportunities. And I've been very fortunate and privileged to build a fantastic life. I just started a new family 6 months ago. We've got a young 6-month-old baby at home, Aiden. And I look at the next 20 years for him and my young family, just for everyone else's families in BC. And I'm terrified that we're on the wrong track as a province after the last 3 years of an NDP government. And I look at my son, my family, and the future generation. I go, I've got to get involved. I've got to make a difference. I've got to make an impact because we are not on the right track. And I want to create opportunity for all of BC, which is something I'm really passionate about.
And of course, that draws you to our party, which is on exactly the same track. Mm-hmm. So remember, people at home, if you go to slido.com and use the code at the bottom of your screen, you can get your questions sent in. We have a few video questions. We're going to start with video number 1, and it's about seniors.
Hello, Tanya. My name is Leslie, and I live here in the beautiful Cowichan Valley. My question for you is, what will the BC Liberals do to help seniors who are living on a fixed income to pay for their care expenses?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm excited to share, Leslie, that we have extensive plans to help our seniors age with dignity. Here are just some highlights. We're going to provide a new seniors home care tax credit up to $7,000 for home care services. And we're going to expand programs to assist seniors and people with disabilities with home renovations. So what this means is that seniors will be able to live longer in their own homes, which is great for taking the pressure off of our care facilities. So this really speaks to my parents who are in their 80s and they're proudly watching tonight because they love their home and want to remain living there as long as they can.
And Tanya, the thing that distinguishes this program is the senior can live at home as long as they want to in the comfort and security of the place they call their own. And that's the best place to be in a pandemic. And I think that's come home in a big way. And so the idea is to have up to $20,000 of expenditures by seniors for things like housekeeping, minor renovations, home repairs, some care support services, and they can get 35% of that back in a tax credit. You think of that in terms of the government cost, might cost $7,000 to help someone to stay in their home in safety and security, as against institutional care, which is dramatically more expensive. So everybody's happier under this program. We do hope lots of seniors take advantage of it. So Alex, why don't we turn it over to you? There's a question on the screen here. Is your PST cut going to be forever?
Well, I'm proud to be part of the BC Liberal ticket and the fact that we have a PST cut that's being announced and we're eliminating PST for the 1 year that we've announced. And then we are having a PST that's been reduced for a couple of years after that to help ordinary British Columbians save up to $1,700 in their pockets, which is unlike what the NDP's announced, which their program will be taxed, whereas a PST cut sees that being real savings in people's pocket, certainly for the next year and a couple of years beyond that, which is exciting for everyone in BC. And
interestingly, one of the economists pointed out that if the NDP send people a check for $1,000, they can spend that anywhere, Amazon, you name it. A lot of it will go outside of British Columbia, whereas the PST cut, by necessity, is promoting BC businesses and encouraging businesses to invest with new construction, with investment in materials and people so that they can get out and actually build up their business and employ more people. So that's the rationale behind it. Now, I think we've got another video coming up. This one is about Icbc, I understand, Alex.
Oh, wow.
Every penny counts in our riding, so what is your plan to lower the Icbc rates?
Well, I heard two great things there. One I heard was every penny counts, and then what are we going to do about Icbc? So absolutely, certainly what I'm hearing on the doorsteps in Vancouver Hastings is every dollar counts. People are being taxed to death, and they're getting to the end of their limits for what they can afford. Certainly over the last couple of years with the 23 new and increased taxes that we've seen from the NDP government, people are at their wits' end. And every penny that we can put back into British Columbians' pockets through things like the PST cut will make a dramatic difference. Now, as it relates specifically to ICBC, as we've talked many, many times, it is time for a change at ICBC. It's time to bring true competition to that marketplace. Just look at myself, for example. I've been hearing about these so-called reductions in rates for good drivers for the last few years. I was really excited to go and renew my insurance this year because I thought I'm going to get some money back in my pocket. Same car, clean driving record, same address, no issues, and my insurance went up by $200. And that is the story I'm hearing on the doorstep time and time again, where people are like, where is this promised rate reduction at ICBC? It's just not there, especially young drivers who are just getting started, just insuring their cars. They don't have money at the best of times, especially with what we've been going through with COVID-19 and the devastating impacts on young people entering the workforce. They simply can't afford ICBC rates anymore. So we're going to bring competition into ICBC, break up that monopoly, and bring rates down.
And I can't see why anyone can object to the idea of having a choice. We ask this of the NDP and say, is there a problem with giving people a choice? Why are you forcing this government-run monopoly down their throat and saying, pay up or you're out of luck, when you should say, well, maybe they should have a choice? It's, to me, an irrefutable argument, but the NDP don't like to talk about it. So the next question on the screen is, what will the BC Liberals do for the environment better than the NDP Green Coalition? And this is a question I'm proud to answer. I was the president of the BC Mountaineering Club for 2 years back in the 90s. I've been extensively out in the bush and a regular kayaker, regular cyclist, a major bird watcher in my available time. And we are very proud of the approach we're taking to this. First of all, on climate change, British Columbia has got to be on the vanguard of this. We've got some of the cleanest electricity supply in the world, which gives us a big head start. So it's time to start working on the other two main sources of greenhouse gas production, which is transportation and buildings. We can do better on buildings with building codes and starting to move into other forms of energy other than burning fossil fuels. We know that oil is on the way out and will be probably out of our lives in about 25 years. In the meantime, we've got to provide transportation systems that provide for electric vehicles. We've got to provide more infrastructure for electric vehicles. We're also going to have to move to more wind and solar electricity production as time goes by, because demand will increase, because all of that transportation will use a lot of electricity. So that's the big picture. On the landscape picture, which is very dear to my heart, we'll be coming out next week with a whole package of policies, including no net loss of wetlands, preserve our wetlands, which are very valuable for fish, for birds, for cleansing our water, make sure we've got proper inventories, proper populations of wildlife. Moose are in big trouble through the southern interior of BC, and we've got to do what we can to support and build up those moose populations. And there's also the whole issue of fish. Some of us know and some of us don't that steelhead populations are nearing extinction in a whole bunch of zones in British Columbia. And our salmon populations, we know, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're terrible. We've got to get onto this before these iconic fish species disappear completely. So it's a package that we're proud of and we'll be rolling out next week. It also includes the fact that we are the government that introduced the world's first and most effective carbon tax. We're not ashamed of that. We say that's the right way to show leadership on the environment. When we hear the NDP talking about their Clean BC plan, you have to remember it's a hoax. 25% of it is just words. There's no funding, there's no program, there's no rollout. It's just window dressing, like so much of what the NDP do. And it's a good reason why Tanya and Alex are motivated to run to defeat the NDP, because most of what they say is grossly inflated rhetoric with no results. And that's the same story in their environmental program. So let's go back to a video now. Our next one up is another ICBC question for Tanya. Over to you.
Hi, my name is Holly. I'm a young BC driver. I was just wondering what the BC Liberal government would do in order to stop the skyrocketing ICBC car insurance premiums that my responsible friends and I struggle to afford every year. Thanks.
It's great to hear from younger voters like yourself, so I appreciate the question. I hear about the steep cost of insurance from my own stepchildren who are still called young drivers. And that is why they were thrilled to learn of the BC Liberals' plan to give all new drivers credit for 2 years of driving experience and increase that credit to 4 years with driver education. So what this means is that you will pay a lot less for your car insurance with a clean record and safe driving habits.
Thanks, Tanya. And our next question up is on the screen. As a social worker, mental health issues are top of mind for me. Will you increase supports and resources for us to help people? And this has actually been the subject of an announcement we did yesterday. There's a phenomenon in this province and our society, really, where the police are increasingly spending time dealing with issues that are really mental health issues. They're ill-equipped to deal with it, but the calls come to the police because there's no one else to call. And so what we've said is the successful programs in Vancouver, Surrey, and Kamloops, where it's known as CAR 40, involve putting a psychiatric social worker or a psychiatric nurse in the vehicle with a police officer. And what we want to do is expand that program across British Columbia. We've announced yesterday that we're putting $58 million into this when we form government, and that will provide the opportunity for the police to spend their efforts on criminal justice issues and not fall into the trap of having mental illness issues be treated as criminal justice issues. There are far too many people in the back of police cars and in lockups at police stations who really should be in hospitals. But it's very difficult to ask a police officer to be a psychiatrist, to try and make a tentative diagnosis, to decide whether they should be in hospital or not. That's just asking too much of our police force. So it's a good combination, it works, and we believe it should be fully funded. So I think we'll do another video now, and that's Alex on jobs.
Alex, what is your plan to create jobs in Hastings Sunrise? How can you help make this be the most vibrant community it can be?
Cool. Fantastic. Great question. Well, I'd just like to interject and say I already think that Vancouver Hastings is a vibrant community. It is a wonderful place to live and bring up a family. But in terms of creating jobs, I hear this on the doorstep for many, many small business owners in our community. 98% of British Columbia's economy is driven by small business. And within Vancouver Hastings, be it on Hastings Street, First Avenue, Commercial Drive, we really have a thriving small business mentality. And what we have to do to instill people to want to have more opportunity is we have to remove a lot of the red tape. Businesses are being suffocated by red tape at the minute. And I know we've introduced as BC Liberals that we're going to be bringing together a panel of experts post the election when we win to look at how do we remove red tape? How do we remove barriers to entrepreneurs who have that dream of starting a small business, want to employ people in their local community? And then things like the PST break to inspire people to come and spend money, come back into the small businesses. Small businesses are really struggling at the minute, and they're fearful of hiring more people because they can't get people in the door. So everything that we're looking at the minute is how can we inspire small business, create that economic activity, and get people back into buying mode.
That's great. And the next question I think is probably directed at me because the Massey Tunnel does not go between Lake Cowichan and Vancouver Hastings. It goes between Richmond and Delta. And for those of you not familiar with it, this tunnel was built as a 4-lane concrete channel in 1958. And it still hasn't been touched since then. The Steveston Interchange is still a 2-lane concrete bridge put up in 1958. And the BC Liberals started a project to put a much larger bridge across to replace this tunnel. We got the deal in at $2.6 billion, which was $900 million under the estimate, complete with transit improvements, the whole story. $95 million was spent. 6 kilometers of sand preload was put in to compact the surface to get ready, and the NDP canceled the whole thing. And their idea of a replacement was to come up with some cockamamie scheme for what they called a deep bore tunnel, which would go far under the Fraser. And you can imagine being in a cement truck coming back up the other side in first gear. It'd take you 15 minutes to get out of the tunnel, let alone the risks of that kind of construction. The Musqueam and Tsawwassen First Nations basically said, forget it. There will not be a tunnel. You try it, we'll take you to court for a decade. And so we said, let's preserve our Pacific salmon. Let's not compact the bottom of the Fraser River. Let's not put 500,000 tons of concrete into the bottom of the Fraser and kill the fish. Why don't we instead complete the bridge project? It's already got environmental approvals. We already know the price tag. We can get started on this immediately after an election. So that's our promise to the people of Richmond and Delta. And it turns out that the people in South Surrey and in Delta North also like this idea very much because they're sick and tired of spending an hour sitting in traffic, chugging one vehicle length at a time, waiting to get into the tunnel. It's also turned out that something that many of us aren't really aware of, it's a major commercial route with huge amounts of truck traffic involving the Point Roberts terminal, the container port there, and those trucks go along at 3 kilometers an hour trying to get through that tunnel. It's hard on the truck drivers, it's hard on the vehicles, it's a complete waste of time and money. And think of the greenhouse gas production from 85,000 vehicles being stuck in that traffic every day. Southbound at the end of the day, northbound at the start of the day. So we have said, let's just get on with it, build the bridge, and it's received a huge amount of support in Delta, Surrey, and in Richmond. So that's the plan, and we're pleased to say that we want to build things. Just like we built the Portman Bridge, the Golden Ears Bridge, the Kelowna Bridge, we know how to do this, and we actually get it done, unlike the NDP, who love to promise things and not deliver. And the NDP bridge record, you only have to look at the Lionsgate Bridge. For $385 million in the 1990s, we went from 3 lanes to 3 lanes. And now they want to spend $1.4 billion of your money changing the Patello Bridge from 4 lanes to 4 lanes. It's a 1933 bridge, and they want to recreate a 1933 bridge. Who does that at that expense? It makes no sense at all. So that's our plan for the Massey Tunnel replacement, and we're pleased that it's receiving so much support. So why don't we go to another video question now. We'll have a small business question for Tanya.
Hi, my name's Clint from Lake Cowichan. I'm a small business owner, and I'd like to know how the BC Liberals would help out a lot of struggling small businesses.
Mm-hmm. Well, small business, as we all know, is the backbone of BC. That makes up 98% of our economy and employs over 1 million people. So we just announced, and I'm really pleased to say that we just announced that we will eliminate the 2% small business income tax. So that, along with our bold economic recovery move to eliminate the PST in the first year and then reduce it to the 3% in the second year, that's going to save your business even more money right away and get more people working in your business, which will help stimulate the BC's economy.
And Tanya, you're exactly right about that. And another thing that we announced today was we are hearing loud and clear from the tourism and hospitality sector that, look at this story. The bear viewing industry had 0 revenue this summer. Fishing lodges had close to 0 revenue. The whale watching business had dramatically reduced revenue. The hotels are empty. What's going to happen to the tens of thousands of people who work in those businesses if they don't survive the winter? So we've said it's time for loan guarantees. It's time to keep these businesses alive by basically saying to their lenders, there's no need to foreclose. Don't drive them into bankruptcy. They'll be here next summer. The jobs will survive. Because we know that once there's a vaccine, those international tourists will be delighted to come back to British Columbia, and it'll be a horror show if they get off the plane from Berlin or Tokyo and there aren't any attractions open. There's nothing to do because they've all gone broke. That's not good enough. So we've said, let's support that industry through the winter and make sure they have a bright 2021. So Alex, this is more up your line. The question on the screen, what will you do to reduce crime? I've lived in Vancouver for 2 decades, having moved from Alberta, and I've never seen it so bad. And similar story for me, I moved here from Edmonton in 1984, and what's going on now seems to be a kind of unraveling on the streets of Vancouver. We see this also in places like the north end of Victoria. We see it in parts of Kelowna, Kamloops, Quesnel, Prince George, Nanaimo. This is happening all over British Columbia, and it's a tragedy. And sometimes it's related to street disorder due to other causes, but there's a criminal element in this that it's coming out in a big way. This year in the city of Vancouver, a 21% increase in aggravated assault and assault with a weapon, a 50% increase in business break-ins. I visited an auto parts store in Hope last Friday. They have twice weekly break-ins, and they have a huge dog that is left inside the facility at night, along with all the alarms, to scare off the robbers. This is not acceptable, and it's something that we cannot just accept as a new normal in our society. So we said a couple of days ago, Alex, we'd be hiring 200 more police officers to fill the vacancies in British Columbia, and along with the mental health worker program for police cars, to let the police get on with policing and try to create more of a sense of order on their streets and 40 more Crown prosecutors to clear up the backlog of criminal charges so that we can get these cases through the courts. We do not have to accept a new, higher level of crime. It's not the right way to live, and as British Columbians, we expect better. So Alex, you probably had this similar experience living in Vancouver of, if you've been here for 20 years, that means you've lost at least 2 bicycles to thieves.
I've lost a couple more than that, and I would echo the question as well. I've seen a real radical spike in crime, certainly in our downtown core, spilling out into the downtown east side over the last 3 years. Obviously, it's driven by a complex multitude of issues, be it healthcare, be it addictions, and we really have to focus on the root cause of what's driving some of those issues. And we have to treat the causes to just prevent the harm from actually happening at the end of the day. Because people they're scared. You're looking at some of the playgrounds, community centers, certainly in the downtown core, and what's happened since the pandemic hit. There's a real fear in people's minds and a real sense of desperation. And we have to start looking at what's the root cause of some of these issues and not just putting Band-Aid solutions on top in the short term.
So our next question is simply put, plan for childcare with 3 question marks after it. And I have to ask your indulgence till 10 o'clock tomorrow because we'll be rolling out a very attractive and very progressive childcare support policy because the core question is, and I think most people have heard, Statistics Canada has put out the information saying the people who are most hurt by this recession because of COVID are people who are in lower incomes, in small companies, who are women. And so what we've got to do is make it possible for them to get back in the workforce. We cannot have what's called a K-type recovery, with one group of people doing quite well when they've got jobs and getting on with their lives, and the other group of people just fading into a life of misery and possible poverty. That's not the way we work as a society. So tomorrow we'll be talking about a very positive agenda to get those people back into the workforce as soon as possible. So maybe we'll do one more video now, and that's, I think, for you, Alex, on economic recovery.
We're at a really difficult time in our province's history, and continuity is really important. We don't want to miss a beat with economic recovery. Can you speak to how you'll ensure that there's a smooth transition with the new government and that we are on track to meet our targets and to get back to work? Thanks.
Cool, great question. Something I've been hearing on the doorsteps a lot in my writing. So one thing that I've heard a lot, and I'll just say it, is to do with continuity. And I'll just be very clear, the medical experts that we pride ourselves on, like Dr. Bonnie Henry, there will be continuity. You know, Dr. Bonnie Henry was with us before the pandemic, and with a new government, with a BC Liberal government, she will still be here with us. So we will rely and continue to rely on the experts around the table. Now, in terms of those driving the decisions, the government, well, that will be the change. And what we need to see, and what we will see, is a continued push on what does our economic recovery look like. Everyone in BC is feeling the pain at the minute of the last few months. And all the plans that we're putting together and putting forward, the PST cut for a year, the reduction and the elimination of the small business tax, all these things are what we're going to be driving towards to create that economic recovery over the next several months.
And that's great news, I think, for everybody who's really worried about where we're going as a society. It's understood that we're going to be fighting off COVID. There's a big second wave happening in Eastern Canada and a really big one in Europe and in much of the USA, parts of Asia, and as we know, Australia's already been through a second wave. So we have to be ready for this. We're not immune by any measure. And when it comes, we're going to have to band together and fight off the virus. But we've also got to start to talk about what happens after the virus. We're all optimistic for a vaccine in 2021, but what will be left of our integrated economy, what will be left of our educational systems, we've got to be ready for that and make sure that we're ready to move ahead once we make it through the peak of the pandemic. The next question is a little bit of a more Icbc intention. I am a new driver with a clean record over the past 2 years of driving. What will you do to make it cheaper for me to get to university? And we talked about this a little bit before, but there's a great example of how not to do auto insurance. In Cranbrook, about a year ago, there was a young woman on the TV news. She had bought a car for $1,000 so that she could get to College of the Rockies, which is outside of town, and also in a fairly effective way get to her part-time job, of which she had 2. Her auto insurance was $1,500 a year. Her parent was a single mom. There was no extra money in that family. And everything was kind of ticking along. It wasn't easy. They were getting by. And then they got the revised ICBC bill for $7,200. And her whole world fell apart. And so we look at this and think, how on earth is this working? And we hear the NDP say, oh, it's all going to be fine. You'll actually like ICBC. Don't worry, there are discounts coming. And it's hard to believe the NDP on anything when it comes to these things because they just don't deliver. Their child care plan, 98% failure rate. $10 a day daycare was announced by the NDP in 2017. There are 2,000 spots in BC, all paid for by the federal government as a pilot program out of over 100,000 spots. And after the election, the NDP said, well, it was just a slogan. It's aspirational. And housing, they promised 114,000 housing units. We got 2,900 temporary modular units. At this rate, it'll take 130 years to fulfill their promise, and that'll be if the temporary ones become permanent. So time after time, we see these NDP promises turn into just fog and smoke. The $400 renter's rebate turned out to be an illusion. And we expect the same is true of John Horgan's promise to pay people with their own money. He's saying, give me $1,100 in taxes and I'll give you back $1,000 in a grant. What's the point of that? So we have to say, oh, excuse me, I'm about to sneeze. We have to say, can you trust the NDP? And there's another point about ICBC where they came along this last Monday and said, well, there was a low accident rate during COVID in the spring of this year. In the summer, people were driving less. So if you elect the NDP, you'll get a rebate. They quickly changed their tune when I pointed out, it's not your money, NDP. It's not even ICBC's money. It's held in trust for the driver. And if you don't pay them back promptly, you'll get sued for a stunning amount of money because all that money got returned everywhere else in Canada except BC. So we have the NDP continuing to play this game with ICBC as if there's some benevolent force that will sprinkle money into your pockets. Let's get this straight. It's a service that's a monopoly. People are forced to buy it, and it should not be up to people to beg ICBC to be kind to them. They're supposed to be in competition, which is what we'll introduce, so that ICBC has to be straightforward with drivers and meet driver expectations. Now, the next question we'll say is for you, Tanya. What will you do differently for Cowichan than the Green Party has done so far?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of the Green Party or their platform, but I will speak about all the good stuff that we'll be doing under a BC Liberal government. And that's going to be to eliminate the PST in the first year and lower it to 3% in the second year. We're going to eliminate the 2% small business income tax. We're going to make our communities safer by treating the causes of mental health and addiction and prevent the harm. And Andrew, this is a big issue in my riding right now. On a day-to-day basis, I'm getting voters telling me that that we need to make our communities safer, especially in the Duncan area, where we're seeing increase in violence and property damage and theft and crime, and it's all linked to mental health and addiction crisis. People and children don't feel safe to walk on the streets anymore, and businesses in Duncan are actually relocating or shutting down because of the crime. So the message really is to make our community safer by really treating the causes of mental health and preventing the harm. We're going to be offering ICBC young drivers lower rates and BC drivers hundreds of dollars a year on auto insurance by ending this ICBC monopoly that you talked about. And as well as mentioning what I mentioned before, helping the seniors stay in their homes longer with a tax credit of up to $7,000 a year. So those are the good things we'll be doing. And my commitment to the riding of Cowichan Valley is that I'm not a leader of a party. I would be voted in as an MLA, and I would commit 100% of my time to representing the constituents of Cowichan Valley in the BC legislature and in my riding of Cowichan Valley. So
and you'd be great at it, Tanya. Thanks for those thoughtful words. Now, this is one we'll cover jointly here. Alex, the question is, sir, Will Liberals be making investments in public transit? And the answer is obviously yes. And just for perspective, we've been big supporters of public transit. We were the ones who actually built out the Evergreen line. I'm proud to say that I was on the negotiating team with the federal government that led to the Canada line being built. It's called the Canada line because we got an extra $400 million from Ottawa, and they wanted the naming rights, and we said, sure, you can call it whatever you want if you'll provide the funding. And it's been a smash hit since it opened up in 2009. So transit's very important, and we also know that since COVID came along, BC Transit and TransLink are well-run organizations, but they are losing money hand over fist because ridership is down to about 30% of normal. We have to get them through COVID because the public transit systems we have are essential to our well-being and our prosperity in the future. We can't watch them go broke. That will be unacceptable. So Alex, do you have any queries that come up in your writing about transit?
Absolutely. Transit in my riding, in my community, is something that comes up a lot. We're on key commuter routes with Hastings, with First Avenue, McGill, and it's something that people are concerned about. They want to see more public transit options. They want to see investment in public transit. And that's something that BC Liberals, we've got a history and a proven track record of actually investing in public infrastructure and public transit, unlike the NDP that has a habit of just making flashy re-announcements of things that have already been talked about. I love the re-announcements on the Canada Line extension recently. I was like, hang on, I think I've seen that announced 4 or 5 times now.
Exactly.
Whereas we actually get things done as the BC Liberals.
And I was actually out in Surrey today to talk about a second Surrey hospital, and the question comes up, how do we know you can deliver? And the contrast is stunning. In 10 years, the 1990s, the NDP did not build a single hospital, nothing in British Columbia. They promised that the Abbotsford Hospital would be built on 12 separate occasions and never did a thing. We built it in 3 years. On top of that, we built 14 hospitals in British Columbia, and we're pleased and proud to say when we say we'll do something, we get it done. Whether it's the Massey Tunnel replacement with a bridge or a second Surrey hospital, we deliver. We did that with SFU Surrey, with the SFU Surrey Engineering Building, with expansions at most of our public secondary, post-secondary institutions. It's a record that we're very proud of, and we say we get stuff done. The next question is, will your PST cut drive more people to shop online? Alex, you're a kind of commercially astute guy. This came up, as I said earlier, the point that was made by an economist to me, that John Horgan's money can just be spent online on Amazon and we'll never see any commerce in British Columbia and someone will deliver a box and that's that. Whereas a PST cut means you're going to be shopping locally. And I've visited a number of retail outlets in the last couple of weeks where they have moved themselves partly online using good Canadian software and been quite successful in generating online business, all of which normally generates PST. And they say they would be delighted to have a PST cut because then they'd count on more both electronic commerce and walk-in traffic. And that's just the retail sector. It's also the phenomenon of things like PST on machinery and on lumber and so forth. That all goes into the building of our economy and creation of work. And with no PST, we've heard from a number of people in the building work and in the industrial sector saying, when will it start? Because they're going to wait until the PST cut comes along and then invest heavily in the future of British Columbia. So that's the perspective on a few issues here. We've got a bit of a wrap-up question here, and it's a very interesting one to contemplate. What are the top issues in your constituency? Tanya, can you give us a flavor of the top 2 or 3 issues in Lake Cowichan?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, the number one issue that I'm hearing every day is the issue of the mental health and addiction crisis. It really has become a crisis in the Cowichan Valley. And again, people are afraid and they don't know what to do. So the message really is from us that we need to treat the causes and prevent the harm. And people deserve access to the right treatment, recovery, and housing. I mean, we really need to find real solutions for those suffering from addictions. So that's the number one issue. The second issue is the need for bold economic recovery. Small businesses across the Cowichan Valley are still suffering from the pandemic. There are still people out of work. And voters are looking for a plan. And I believe they will vote for the best plan to get BC back on track. In fact, I hear from voters on the door that they remember the BC Liberal track record for turning around the economy after the NDP ran it to the ground the last time. So they're asking, what can we do? What is our plan? And I'm excited to tell them about us eliminating the PST in the first year and reducing it to 3% in the second year, eliminating the 2% small business income tax. These are all bold economic recovery steps that will help every British Columbian and every small business owner, because that will put more money in the pockets of everyday people to invest in in what they need to thrive.
And Alex, over to you. A couple of top issues in your writing.
Absolutely. Top issues that I'm hearing in Vancouver Hastings, it's economic recovery and jobs. Just like we just talked about, people are scared that their small businesses are going to fail over the next 6 months. We've been hearing on the doorsteps from many, many people who've invested their life savings, put blood, sweat, tears into their business, and they're concerned that with the burden of extra taxes, of lack of support from the government, and some of the support measures which have been held up by calling this unnecessary election during a global pandemic, people are scared that their businesses are going to fail in the next 4 to 6 months. So jobs, economic recovery is a major priority, which is why things like the PST cut and the elimination for that first year, the employers' small business tax elimination, things like that are really going to make a dramatic impact in our community. Second thing I'm hearing about is transportation. People need to get to work. And the third thing is childcare is coming up time and time again on the doorstep. People want to get back to work. They need affordable childcare options to be able to get them out and get them back to work.
That's great. And the last question we've got here is almost a philosophical one. And maybe we'll start with Tanya on this one. I know I've formed quite strong views about this in the last 6 months. How has this pandemic changed your outlook on life or business or family or politics?
Well, it's changed my work life dramatically because I'm working from home. I have been since March, so I see my husband a lot more, which is a good news. I do see my family less, unfortunately. I have grandkids and I have stepchildren, and unfortunately, that has suffered quite a bit in the last few years, or it's the last few months. Other than that, on the campaign trail, because I'm a new candidate, there has been no restrictions in terms of door knocking. We do it very safely with masks and social distancing, and people really respect the fact that we're getting out there, making a presence, and taking the effort to get to know voters.
Alex, over to you. What's been your perception of the change?
Well, I think that for all of us, we've been impacted greatly by the pandemic. It's affected our lives, our families, our businesses. For me personally, though, one of the things that I've witnessed, that I've seen, and I'm hearing from a lot of people, is just the need and the deep desire for strong, bold leadership. People are looking at leaders, be it in your companies, in your homes, and certainly political leaders, to look for bold, decisive action to help steer us out of this global pandemic. People are scared, they're fearful. I'm scared about the future. And what I see and what I know is that I want good, solid platforms and programs like the BC Liberals have got to help steer us and lead us out of this pandemic that we're in.
And in terms of my learnings and perspective, the thing that's really struck me is our family has basically come home. We have 4 people in the household with full-time jobs now. I've got a student doing 4th year university. She's normally in Montreal. She's now in the living room. My wife is working from home. I'm doing this job, which is a little more mobile, but also from home. And my son has started a job in the Eastern Time Zone, and he's working from home as well. So I have 3 people in the house starting work at 5:30 a.m. every day, and they finish up about 2:30 or 3, except when they've got overtime to do, in which they're working long, long days all at home. We are the lucky ones. We're the ones who can work from home. We're not the people who've lost our jobs as a hotel cleaner, as a cook, as some kind of tourist guide, as a server, as a flight attendant, as a pilot. We are the lucky ones. And we've got to keep that in perspective, because there are hundreds of thousands of people in this province who are currently living on federal transfer payments, who are wondering what the future holds. And we all have a duty to support and protect each other and make sure those people actually have a future. Because if we start to, as a society, divide up into those who are going to protect what they've got and the people who are just left adrift on some kind of federal support program, It will be a very, very decisive thing that will shrivel our economy and lead to all kinds of tensions between people. We've got to stick together. We've got to rebuild British Columbia, restore that confidence. So for that person who works as a flight attendant, we've got to say, you will have work. It will come back. It's not over. You won't lose your house. Your kids will finish school. And on top of those people, we have to think of those people in transitions, the high school graduates, the new graduates from colleges and universities who are having trouble finding work. And even if they find work, they have trouble settling in because there's no place to go and meet the people they're working with. So it's a very difficult time for a lot of people, and we must never forget to look out for the interests of those who are most vulnerable in this pandemic. And that's our party philosophy, and I know the two of you agree with that, and that's why we're running for public office. So our goal, through things like abolishing sales tax, eliminating the small business income tax, supporting the tourism industry through the winter, all of those things are designed to give people that sense of hope and purpose that British Columbia can be the land of opportunity for everyone. No winners and losers, no friends and enemies like the NDP have. Our goal is to make it better for everyone. So thank you both for putting your name on the ballot and coming forward as candidates, and let's do our best to serve the people of BC. Thanks.